I am energized by this conversation with Bob Pizzini, and I'm eager to share it with you. Bob brings so much reflection to the culture and language of leadership, so much reflection on how we translate experiences and approaches of empowering others. Our conversation challenged me to think of the cultures we live in every day, such as our schools, our families, our organizations, our groups of friends. Each of our cultures has its own language, and in each culture, we can understand and apply the language of leadership that Bob talks about to bring harmony and effectiveness to the group and to its mission. Or we can miss out on the positive impact because we fail to reflect on the language and culture of leadership, which is powerful life and community. Bob is fun to listen to, great to learn from. Enjoy his collegiality and insights, and check out his leadership courses and his website. I'm Norah Jones. Welcome to It's About Language. This podcast connects language and culture to life, learning, and hope. You'll experience insightful conversations with creative leaders in the fields of education, business, arts, and science. My guests shed light on the impact of language and culture on individuals and society as they share their stories and experiences. You'll be informed and inspired as we explore how language and culture make us human and bring hope in the midst of a challenging world. It's a great pleasure for me to bring as my guest today Bob Pizzini. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. How are you, Nora?
I'm doing well, and I need to do just a little more Italian on that one. Pizzini, okay? As you said,
Pizzini, that's right.
Pizzini, Bob Pizzini. And I am excited to share you with the podcast listeners because you have, well, many things that you're going to share with us today. A wonderful site in Virginia Beach where people can do the skydiving they've always dreamed of, but with actual help. And this course, Elevate Your Leadership, which I wanted to take, thank you very much for having me as part of the course, the moment I saw it. And one of the things that appealed to me and was confirmed in the course is that you are based in the language of leadership and the culture of leadership, and you translated it beautifully during the course from your native language, if you will, of the military to civilian language and civilian culture, especially through storytelling. Why was it important to you to bring that story, leadership, out to the world, Bob?
I think that leaders are always learning, and storytelling can only be done if leaders reflect on their experiences. And if they've done enough deep reflection, there's a lot of value that people can pull out of those experiences. So if people are metacognitive, if they think very deliberately about what they've learned along the way, then they have something very valuable to share with others. And it's a very deliberate process, though. And unfortunately, I think most of us don't do that. And those that do it have something very valuable to share with others.
What are some of the aspects of a methodical, careful, planned opportunity to understand this, again, language and culture of leadership?
I think that people should have a deliberate process. And, as I discuss the art of leadership and the science of leadership, I talk about my deliberate process. And for the art, for example, my deliberate process is first to have my own personal definition of the word leadership. And then I build upon that with leadership styles that I'm comfortable with and I think I'm good with, and power types that I use to good effect. And when I say good effect, that's for the good of the team. So again, I think that people have to have a foundation. That foundation has to be built on something. For me, it's defining leadership. And reminding myself of that definition every single day. That way I know if I'm leading or if I'm doing something other than leading. And then once again, leadership styles, power types, and then something else that I call critical traits. So having this deliberative process, I think is critical to being the most effective leader you can be for the greatest amount of people over the longest duration of time. And that's what we look for in our leadership, is to be highly effective, affect a lot of people, and be good at what you do for your entire career. And hopefully that's a long career.
Indeed, sounds powerful because it's about duration as well as specific approach. What is the definition of leadership that you share with the world, Bob?
Yes, so my two-word definition is enabling others. And then the longer version of that is to use my education, my experience, and my training to enable others to accomplish their objectives.
And what are some of the objectives that you had in mind for yourself when you thought of leadership and that you find are, shall I put it this way, most effective in those that you train and work with?
Sure. So let me just kind of set the scene a little bit, because I was in the military for 26 years, and there's a very specific and well-timed training process, leadership training process in the military. And I think it's of tremendous value. Now, the military can be quite directive at times, which is appropriate in situations where life and death, damage to property, etc., all that is on the line. So kind of an emergency responder type of situation. But then there's also a time where leaders have flexibility, and they have to recognize that. And it's in those moments of flexibility that you can really enable others to lead, to accomplish their objectives, to grow, to develop professionally. Those are the things that I think true leadership brings to the team. You bring opportunities for growth, and you find opportunities where they don't necessarily exist, or you create opportunities for growth amongst your teammates where those opportunities don't necessarily exist.
That's a powerful vision. Let me ask you, Bob, when you are around people in the military, now that you are working with this training outside of the military, are there words that some people use or behaviors that some people use that attract attention of current leaders to know that there is potential there? Or does everyone have potential?
I would say that just about everyone has potential, but there are words and actions without a doubt. And those words and actions are, number one, are they following my example? Are they aligning with my initiatives, with my vision? If I've communicated my vision properly, are my teammates aligning with that vision? And one clear indicator of that is if they use your language. If they can, like my definition of leadership, for example, I share that with everybody, enabling others. And when they use your language, either with each other, with their peer group, or when they use your language back at you, or sometimes I like to call it using my own words against me. Yeah, that's when you're really being effective. And I'll give you an example of that. We have in a book I read called The High Performance Workplace by Sue Bingham and Bob Duzine. They talk about assuming the positive. So if somebody made a mistake, or if something seems to be wrong, rather than assume that they were intentionally devious or errant, assume that the person intended well and something went wrong. So in your inquiry, in your approach, you would assume the positive. 95% of the time or greater, that is a correct assumption. So you assume the positive in people coming up short, if you will, and then you put them on a path for recovery. You identify the problem together, and hopefully they come up with a solution. One more example of that is when I have 6 people on my management team, and we talk about things like the trough. So Daniel Pink wrote a book, and in this book he talks about peak trough recovery. My whole team has been educated on peak, trough, and recovery. And quite simply, peak is highly productive time, trough is I can't get anything done time, and recovery is something in between. So when we sit down once a week for the management meeting, we look for people in the trough, or people in the trough use the language. They go, "I'm sorry, I'm in a trough right now." So when we use that common language that's unique to the aspects of leadership that we pay attention to, it really becomes a very powerful force for the team.
And it's interesting because you cited a particular author, a particular book, and using the language of that, but it strikes me now that your team has kind of its own vocabulary for understanding that there's mutual agreement on approaches, as you put it earlier. It strikes me that there's kind of a culture of leadership then within each organization. Is that true, do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And thank you because you're helping me awaken and be alert to my organization. There is a culture of leadership. I talk about culture within the workplace quite a bit, and that's a very important aspect of the workplace. But culture of leadership is something that I have certainly built within my organization, but I never called it that. And so thank you for helping me further enable a culture of leadership just by acknowledging that there is one.
Well, I'm delighted that that question brought that out, and may it continue to bear fruit for you. It's interesting because again, the point of view of translating the culture that you experienced in the military to your current business. Was there difficulty when you first started this? Did you find that it was hard to, well, translate your native language, if I keep using that concept?
Yes, and the answer to that is yes. And I'll give you a few examples. So when I established my business, I have 35 people on the team. Now, when I was active duty, I was the operations officer for an EOD, explosive ordnance disposal mobile unit. I had 9 teams assigned to me. Those 9 teams had about 10 people per team. So I was responsible for operationally deploying roughly 100 individuals amongst those 9 or so teams. But at any rate, there's a structure within that team dynamic, and I use that structure. Basically, there's one line leader, if you will, platoon leader for every 5 or 6, maybe up to 10 teammates, 10 employees. So I set that structure up internally. So there's accountability and reporting and channels of communication and chain of command, etc. And that all was and continues to work very well. What I did wrong is I put people in leadership positions who were not prepared for it.
Ah,
And my mistake there was in the military, when you're 23, 24, 25 years old, if you enlisted at the age of 18, you're on your second or third leadership assignment when you're 25. In the private sector, leadership training really doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the colleges and universities unless somebody gets a graduate program. But again, that's just education. And education without experience is merely philosophy. So the hard hitting leadership experience that a 25-year-old has in the military is what I lived with for 26 years of my career. So when I started my private business, I put 25, 26-year-olds in key leadership positions. They had education, they had prior work experience, but they didn't have the tools of leadership. And therefore they failed, but that was really my failure because I did not set them up for success. So that's one example of how, my military expectation did not translate accordingly. Another example is, the language, like, right? So it's not noon yet. So we'd say, 900, 1000, 1045, 1100. But when you get to 1200 and 1300 and 1400, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, just using that simple military vernacular does not go over well in the private sector. So, no, nor should it. What was I thinking? What the hell was I thinking? Hey, at 1400, we're going to have a staff meeting. Everybody's like, what are you talking about?
oh
So,
my.
yeah, and there's a couple other things, but for the most part, the good stuff did translate very well. And those who are true teammates and on board, they appreciate it. They understand it. They appreciate it. And I will say that they course correct, like that 1400 thing I just gave you. They're like,
Yeah.
boss, quit doing that. So
Uh-huh. Interesting. Interesting. As a career educator and certified Gallup Strengths Coach, I engage with you and your team to bring energy,
focus, and breakthroughs to all you do. Fluency Consulting provides workshops, presentations, talks, and team building events for K-16 educators and education-oriented organizations and businesses. Get energized, experience new insights, pathways, and perspectives. For more information, see our show notes or go to fluency.consulting.com.
So they themselves are helping to train you in the new lingo.
Oh, no question about it. The feedback I get, that comes from a team with very high trust. You know, you have to have high trust, but I want my assumptions to be challenged, to make sure that I'm making the best decision possible. And so something as simple as saying, boss, quit using the military time, or some other things, that's feedback that I value.
Oh, and you just used two words I'm going to have to bring you back to. You talked about, and I'm going to use again, culture as the basis. There's a culture of trust, and there's a culture in which you were challenged. How do you provide the words and the experiences so that that kind of culture, both trust and challenge, can be developed?
Yeah, so I think the way it happened with my current team, and keep in mind, my general manager, my sales and marketing manager, my special programs manager, my customer service manager, they've all been on board now for, well, the general manager and the sales and marketing manager have been on board from the beginning, so just about 8 years. So
Okay.
we've worked together now for 8 years. And then the others, we've all been together, they're probably in year 3, year 4, something like that. So we've all been together for a long time. And over that period of time, a very high degree of trust either takes hold or it doesn't. And there's a couple other managers that aren't here anymore. Like I said, it was my fault in putting them in a role they weren't ready for. But one of the things that happened is that trust was not able to develop. And as a matter of fact, whatever trust there was actually deteriorated.
Oh, uh-huh.
But we have a high degree of trust amongst the team. They can come to me with anything. At least I hope that's the case. But I think it is. And I think it's been proven because they've come to me with things, again, challenge my assumptions. And I didn't snap and I didn't take anybody's head off. I said, thank you for the observation. In a couple cases, I said, thank you for keeping me from doing something really stupid. After after some
Mm-hmm.
discussion, they're like, what are you thinking? Are you really going to do that? So it takes time to develop
Interesting.
trust, and the trust on my team. If somebody doesn't show up or they're late, it's not why were you late? It's are you okay?
Okay.
There's an immediate concern for the
Hmm.
teammates' well-being, not again assuming the positive, right? Well, I'm not assuming that they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing.
Bob, there's a modeling there, but there's also a labeling of the modeling so that people are understanding what they see, not only in the behaviors, but also in words. How do you go about making sure that you have, well, the modeling is part of your character, you, Bob Pizzini, but you are able to then label that both right in your staff and also for these courses that you provide. How do you go about the reflection that allows that to happen?
So the simple answer to that is through core values. And within my organization, we have 3 core values, which are loyalty, integrity, and professionalism. I brief the team on core values. I ask people to tell me about core values. I ask people to tell me how they thought about and applied one of those 3 core values in their workday yesterday or last week or last month. I keep those core values very a very bright blip on the radar screen. I keep those core values front and center. And again, I want the team talking to each other about core
Hmm.
values. And when I in brief every new teammate and I talk about core values, I talk about how we use core values to lift each other up, to help each other out, but also to call each other out. We can call each other out in a way that's not offensive to make sure that we're keeping our teammates, in the right lane, on the right track, etc. And so I like to, first of all, I like to apply the following to myself, and then I ask my team to do this. If somebody asks me to do something and it's not an immediate yes, if I have a hesitation, I compare it against the core values. Am I violating loyalty if I say yes or no, depending on whatever they asked? Am I violating integrity if I say yes or no? Am I violating professionalism if they say yes or no? And if any one of those holds me up, then I've got to go talk to somebody about this and make sure I'm making the right decision. But that's what I want my teammates to do. Gauge the situation against our core values, loyalty, integrity, and professionalism. And if the answer's not clear, go talk to somebody about it.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, that would sure make a difference, no question. Thank you for sharing that. And Bob, I'm turning to it's kind of like the idea of education. All right, you have in I Fly Virginia Beach, you have something that is, yeah, it's about like jumping out of airplanes. Okay, but it's not just about that, I presume. And I'd like you, if you could, and if you can't, separate them out. But you mentioned earlier that young people that have gone through education and not begun the leadership opportunities in the military at an earlier age, 18, 19, etc., sort of have a different start. You made some mistakes there as far as believing what they were able to do from a leadership point of view. There's a lot of educators that listen to this podcast, and they are overwhelmed, okay? And systems are hard to work with sometimes. But do you have any insights into how it is that young people in schools could be prepared a little bit more for leadership? So there were two things. I think they might actually go together, but if not, take them apart, please.
Well, I think that in schools, those core values I just mentioned, there has to be moral and ethical character has to be developed, and it's part of the school system. It's certainly the responsibility of the household, of the family, but moral and ethical character has to be well developed, and unfortunately, I think that's the part that's coming up short. All these other things get attention, but developing great moral and ethical character is getting the short end. And we develop that through our religious affiliations. We develop that through our family or our extended family or our neighborhoods. And if all those are in alignment, people have great moral and ethical character. But when one of those things is askew, it can make people think and act differently. We are the product of our childhood experiences, and if those experiences are challenging, then I think people will have a tendency to view life as a challenge. And there's also timing throughout the day. Just going back, taking your example of the classroom, there's timing throughout the day. People in the morning are generally more receptive, more alert, more analytical, more cognitive, if you will. And then that just decreases throughout the day. So by afternoon, things can be quite challenging. I'll take a pause there. I know I went all over the place.
No, not at all. I mean, I'm feeling it with my gut, having the kinds of classes in a 7-period day, for example. Absolutely. So thank you for that. And how about then what you see when you bring folks in from all, I expect, different expectations of what will happen with I Fly Virginia Beach? Why did you set that up, and what do you discover that relates to your leadership that you always bring to what you're doing?
Yeah, are you talking about the Elevate Your Leadership experience, or just?
Well, I was talking specifically about the I Fly Virginia Beach, but for sure you can also include the course.
Yeah, so, within iFly, I mean, again, 35 people on the team, 6 people on the management team, and we have a very deliberate process of communication. We have the core values that I mentioned, and the core values are actually a component of the overall mission statement, or what I call the strategic plan. So every year I author a new strategic plan, but most of it is the same from year to year. For example, mission, vision, and values. In theory, an organization's mission, vision, and values would never change. But I actually changed my mission statement just this past year. My old mission statement was, we deliver the dream of flight. But after 7 years of delivering the dream of flight, what I've noticed is we bring people together through the flight experience or through the dream of flight. So that's our new mission statement. We bring people together through the dream of flight. But I've got the mission statement, I have our vision statement, and to summarize our vision statement, it basically says we're going to be the best in the industry. We're going to lead the industry, and we're going to innovate. We're going to adapt and innovate and be leaders in the industry. So that's the vision. And then values I already mentioned, loyalty, integrity, and professionalism. So that's the top part. There's four sections to my strategic plan. That's section 1, mission, vision, values. And then I've got a motto, which is excellence in all we do. I stole that that's an Air Force core value. Stole it straight from the Air Force.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then culture is the next section in my strategic plan. And culture has 8 bullets unto itself. Enable fitness. Enable new and innovative ideas to take hold, to be given a chance, etc. So there's 8 things in my cultural section. Then I have focus areas as the 3rd section, and 2021 specific goals as the 4th section. So it's a strategic plan. It gives everybody a sense of direction. It gives everybody a sense of where they belong. And it gives us all something to rally around at the end of the day.
Is there anything in the experience of the folks that you throw out of the plane, that you provide this flight experience for, that has an impact on the participants' understanding of what the culture of leadership and trust and challenge is all about? Anything connecting their experience, those that do the flying?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to approach that. So I'll approach it just, mom, dad, and the kids, what I affectionately call mom, dad, and the kids. They come in, I call this the grumpy dad story. So they check in. So there's 3 floors in the building. First floor is check-in, reception, retail. Second floor is the flight chamber, the flight deck. And then 3rd floor is all the admin space. So the family of 4 comes and checks in on the 1st floor. And dad's grumpy because he just paid a lot of money for something he's never even heard of that his wife signed everybody up for. And he's like, what the hell is this? Then they get checked in. He starts to see a little bit more of the building of the 1st floor. And we have a first-class presentation. Our facility is in great shape, and it's very modern. It's actually kind of futuristic and very clean and well maintained. So Grumpy Dad gets a look around the building, and he's like, wow, this place looks to be, pretty squared away. Then they go up to the 2nd floor of the flight deck, and as soon as they get there, they'll see the group ahead of them, having the flight experience. The kids are going, oh, Mom, this is awesome. And then Mom looks at Dad and goes, see, honey, isn't this cool? And he's not smiling yet, but he starts to kind of shake his head up and down a little bit. And he's like, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. And then they go through the classroom. They go through the training. They come out and they have the flight experience. And whenever there's a family of 4, they always line up. It'll either be son or daughter first. And then, the other one, son or daughter second. And then mom goes third and dad always goes last. So yeah, it is. So that son or daughter gets in there, and you can see mom going, oh, honey, please just don't freak out. Enjoy it. Have a good time. And that son or daughter gets in there and kills it. They crush it. They do great every single time. So son goes, daughter goes. Now it's mom's turn. Mom always does the best because she's the most relaxed at this point.
That's encouraging for me, mind you.
Yeah. The kids are a bit up on adrenaline, so they're pretty energetic. And mom just watched the kids do good. She's feeling great. And women are more flexible. They kind of get in this natural body flight position a little quicker. So mom goes in there, does great. She's smiling from ear to ear throughout her whole flight experience, which is 1 minute, by the way, a 1 minute flight experience. And then dad gets in. Now all eyes are on dad. And dad knows it. And he's like, well, I better just do a good job here. So dad gets in. And for the first 15 or 20 seconds, Dad fights it a little bit. And then he starts to relax. And then he realizes that this is pretty damn cool. And
Yeah.
then about 30 to 45 seconds in, the smile hits his face. And so they repeat. They all go through a second time. And by the time they're leaving, Dad's a hero. Everyone's happy. They're smiling. And they're like, oh, Dad, thanks so much. So,
Uh-huh.
so grumpy Dad turns into the hero. It's pretty cool to see that on a daily basis.
That's very cool. And now they have a common experience as a family too and face some fears together.
That's right. That's exactly right. Now, in the professional setting, I incorporate the flight experience into the Elevate Your leadership development that I do, leadership
Hmm.
development and team building. But I incorporate the flight experience as kind of a metaphor for getting outside of your comfort zone. So people who have never done this before are now all of a sudden in a group. They just met each other. And not only are they going to do this flight experience, but I also want them to critique each other. I want them to watch each other and notice when somebody did something that was particularly well, or they corrected a problem. Say, for example, somebody has a slow turn to the left that's unintentional, and then they make an adjustment with their hand in their body position, and that slow turn stops, and they're nice and stable. I want everybody else to observe that and say, when you dropped your right shoulder and raised your left shoulder, that's when you got stable. That's when everything was perfect. So we observe each other, and ultimately we're critiquing each other on something that we're not terribly familiar with, but leaders need to kind of get out there sometimes and do the best they can with the limited information they have.
Oh, that's a huge point you just made there. We may not have all the information we need, but leaders take a, would you say, an informed by experience?
Yeah, it's a risk analysis ultimately, which is a
Mm.
military term, but they've conducted some type of risk analysis and determined I've got enough information to make a decision here, and it might be the wrong decision, but at some point you have to go, and if leaders are slow in the decision making process, they're holding up the rest of the team, and that can be tiring and confusing to the rest of the team. Now, I don't mean, move forward full speed ahead recklessly, but what I mean is you have to be comfortable with a certain amount of information that's not 100%, but it's enough for you to make a decision to proceed.
Fantastic. Now, Bob, it's interesting. There's a storytelling that one does to oneself about one's own capabilities, one's own experiences. And there are stories, I'm sure, that you and those that you train tell out for others to understand where their history might be coming from, or potentially you have in your course tapped on a story that someone has that illustrates their attitudes and experience with leadership. Do you share a story that provides insights into your growth and understanding what leadership means?
I do. I share a few. There's one that's kind of the main one, if you will, and that's a story where I made a mistake as somebody who was uh, charged with a lot of responsibility early in my military career. I did not obey a directive from the commanding officer. It was a fairly on the spot, very new directive. And as a result of me not following that guidance, people's lives were put in danger. And I thought my career was going to be over. But this particular commanding officer, this leader, put me on a path for recovery. He recognized that although I did act out of self-interest, overall, that was uncharacteristic of me. And he decided to give me a get out of jail free card. You could almost literally call it that. And
Yeah, ouch.
yeah, yeah. But I made a big mistake. I owned the mistake. I felt terrible about the decision I made. And after some discussion with my commanding officer, he decided to give me a chance to recover from that. And so great leadership on his part. The summary with that story is you owe your leader 100%. There's nothing between 100% and zero that's acceptable. In this case, I said, we're going to follow that order starting tomorrow. There's no, we're going to follow that order starting tomorrow. When it's immediate, it's immediate. So you owe your leader 100%. Second thing is, as a leader, you have got to require 100% from your team. If you accept less, that's what you're going to get time and time again. And third and most important, as in this case, if people own their mistakes, because they will come up short, they will disappoint from time to time. But if they own it, and if they're bought into the organization and the mission, put them on a path for recovery. If they're good people, if they act more with heart than with ego, put them on a path for recovery.
Bob, you just did a beautiful, articulate discussion of how the culture of leadership and being together and the language that is used in leadership makes all the difference in the world. This is great, and having taken your course, I know that I could listen for another several days to what it is that you have to share with great joy, and did in fact do it. But at this particular point, what I'd really appreciate your doing is imagining now the folks that are listening to this podcast, and just one last opportunity for you to invite them, warn them, engage them, share with them. What would you want to leave?
First, I guess I will just do a straight up endorsement or advertisement, if you will. I would ask them to visit robertpizzini.com. That's Robert, Pizzini.com, where you can learn more about the leadership development and team team training, leadership development and team development, team training that I do. I would also like you to be aware, or like the dear listeners to be aware of Elevate Your Leadership, which is my offering, once again, for leadership development and team training. And know that my approach is unique and different. It's not textbook. There is no textbook, or there are many textbooks, depending on how you look at it. And leadership is an ever-present thing. If you are responsible for anybody other than yourself, you are in a leadership position. And getting back to those 25-year-olds, most companies and corporations do not prepare people early enough to be in a leadership position. So visit robertpizzini.com or visit iFly Virginia Beach, either on the web or better yet in person. And I'd love to meet everybody. I'd love to meet your listeners and show them exactly who we are and what we do.
Thank you. And I certainly do encourage the listeners to check out Bob's sites, check out the course. I can highly recommend that course, Bob. I learned so much from it, but more than learning, although learning is certainly of high value, I appreciated being with you as a leader that you speak about being unconventional, and it's not only unconventional in your approach, but I experienced you as a man of compassion, humility, focus, and articulation. And that's a rare combination, and it was great to learn much, much more about leadership directly from you because of the character that you bring. So thanks for all that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that tremendously. Those were 4 pretty great words there. But yeah, thank you. We had a great group. Your course, the people in your cohort, if you will, it was a great group. And like I say, I take away more from those guided discussions than I deliver. At least that's the way I feel about it.
Well, we can have a wrestling match over that, but the fact is that it was great. And I appreciate so much your being my guest here today on this podcast.
Thank you, Norah. It's been an awesome discussion.
Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. Let's continue the conversation. Be sure to check out my website, fluencyonline.com, to learn more about our guests and to check out the resources and information they've shared with us there. I have other ideas, resources, and opportunities there for you too. Again, thanks so much for listening, and until next time.